the past several months, everyone has been talking about ChatGPT. And a lot of us agtech nerds are wondering how advancements like this in artificial intelligence might impact the future of the ag industry.
And so we said, all right, what would it take for us to take this amazing new technology, really game-changing innovation, and make it something that is useful and reliable and dependable for farmers? And so over the past couple of months, we've been teaching Norm, so to speak, about agriculture.
Norm, whose name pays homage to Dr. Norman Borlaug, is a new AI-powered ag advisor created by Farmers Business Network. Co-founder and CMO Charles Barron says not only is this providing more value to their farmer members, but already after being live for only 2 weeks, they're able to create new features and tools to serve farmers' needs in the moment.
We didn't have this a week ago. We get to see exactly what farmers want to ask. And then, Kit and the team can deploy that still in the period where that's a relevant question. We're still in the middle of planting here. So the technology is evolving almost as quickly as the needs, are being identified.
Charles Barron and Kit Barron of FBN introduce us to Norm, their AI-powered ag advisor, on today's Future of Agriculture podcast. Well, hello, fellow ag nerds. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the founders, farmers, innovators, and investors, the people shaping the future of the ag industry. Can't wait to share today's episode with you. I really enjoyed this conversation with Kit and Charles. But before we dive in, I first want to take just a moment to thank our quarterly presenting sponsor for this quarter, which is Calgary Economic Development. Now, what makes Calgary, Alberta, the engine of Canada's agriculture industry? With direct access to a strong agricultural base, Calgary is a well-connected region with collaboration across geographic areas, industries, and research and training institutions. Calgary has experts in all things ag, including primary production, crop science, protein development, ag and food tech innovation, and animal health. It's also a hub for controlled environment agriculture, energy transition opportunities, and value-added food and beverage processing. Calgary is a hotspot for agri-food production and technology development, which is why multinational agribusiness leaders call the city home. In Calgary, they're leading the agribusiness revolution, and you are welcome to join. Visit calgaryagbusiness.com to learn more. That's calgaryagbusiness.com. And thank you so much to Calgary for supporting the Future of Agriculture podcast. All right, now back to today's conversation with Kit Barron and Charles Barron. There's no relation. Their last names are spelled slightly different. Kit's got one more R in his last name, but coincidentally, they work for the same company, are doing interesting things in agriculture, and last name is both Barron. However, today's episode is not about Kit or Charles as much as it is about Norm, their AI-powered ag advisor tool that they launched just weeks ago, but already has me very, very fascinated about the potential impact on the future of agriculture, as I'm sure others are likely working on similar text or chat-based AI tools to provide answers in the moment for farmers and other people in the agriculture industry. Charles has been on the podcast before, but that was clear back on episode 75, which aired in October of 2017. So we were long overdue for another episode. And that one, he provided a lot of the basics about what Farmers Business Network is. It was founded in 2014. It's best known as a farmer-to-farmer network and e-commerce platform. But of course, a lot has changed over the past 6+ years. Kit Barron has worked with farm data for a very long time with familiar names such as the Climate Corporation and FarmTogether. He now serves as the head of data science and analytics for FBN. Charles, Kit, and I talk a lot about Norm, the potential for artificial intelligence to provide useful advice for farmers, what this means for ag tech in the future. Questions such as, does this reduce the need for APIs as data pipelines if we can essentially train AI models to go get the data we need? Really presents a lot of interesting questions about the future of agriculture and questions that Norm and others will someday be able to answer. But be sure to stick around for the end of today's episode, where randomly you're going to hear Kit, Charles, and I come up with the idea to have Norm write a script for a potential intro to this podcast episode. And then I actually gave that script to another AI tool called Descript, which generated the audio of that script in my voice, which is so weird. I'm going to be honest, it's a little spooky, but make sure you stay tuned for that. To kick things off, though, Charles is going to provide a little catch-up since our last interview nearly 6 years ago. Then you're going to hear Kit's voice describing more about Norm specifically. I think you'll really enjoy this one. Here's my conversation with Charles Barron and Kit Barron of FBN.
Glad to give the update because it's been many years since we've talked here, and FBN's become many things. Again, we started as a data network, but we've always at our core been a producer network focused on profitability on the farm. We've done that in many different ways. That's been the through line of FBN. So, now FBN is pretty much the largest provider of inputs online through FBN Direct. We ship to thousands of farms around the US, Canada, and have a new pilot actually in Brazil right now. And we have made a whole host of improvements and optimizations around that. We now also have FBN Financial. So FBN Financial started a couple years ago, which does a full spectrum of lending for the farm, of input loans, land loans, operating loans, equipment loans, farmland capital programs, and then a range of marketing and sustainability programs as well. So, we've had crop marketing as a feature of FBN for a long time. That's now turned into sustainability programs and premiums. And again, enabled by that technology platform and the base ability to process and handle and help producers manage data. Systems that need monitoring and verification for sustainability attributes and credits plug into the FBN system. And because we have the crop marketing system, we can then enable sales and therefore premiums to take place between them. So just this week, we started rolling out with ADM. And for ADM, FBN is the exclusive provider of the sustainability monitoring and verification technology behind their programs of ADM regeneration. They're now introducing the FBN app to their growers as well. So that's a tremendously exciting initiative because, again, FBN is a technology platform, having the ability to work with growers, work with field level information, as well as work with products and then work with markets, enables you to create all kinds of interesting combinations and solutions for farms. So, with the ADM program, we hope that will have, tens of thousands of farms who sell to ADM now able to use the FBN platform to capture premiums, work with downstream buyers to develop sustainability credits. And then we can even do next level innovations on top of that, which we started doing this year again as well, like things like regenerative ag finance. So now if you've verified the fact that you're doing regenerative ag, you can qualify for a better rate on your loan through FBN. Because we have the finance platform, that's an instant approval process as well. So as those pieces build out, there just become more and more tools that a farm can utilize. But one of the really cool things that I was excited to talk about, we just started pushing out here last week as well, new optimizations around our delivery infrastructure. So in order to deliver farm goods and inputs, you actually need a custom-built delivery system. You can't really use Amazon to ship large quantities of chemicals, for example, which have to be contained and have environmental controls around them and be segmented in various situations. So we have 30 facilities, 30 warehouses or logistics centers, as we call them, across the US and Canada. And we now can optimize when a grower shows up to the website. Let's say they show up from in Southwest Nebraska, and we have a facility in Lincoln, Nebraska, a facility in Brighton, Colorado, and a facility in Hayes, Kansas. At any given point when a grower is hitting our site, we're then optimizing the positioning of that inventory to their exact location to find them the fastest possible routing of that product. And it's looking at millions of data points a second to create that optimization. And by doing that next level of delivery optimization, we now can basically put 99% of our shipments within a 3-day window, which is just a goal we've had for a very long time. So it means that someone's going to come to the FBN website, 99% of the time, they're going to see a product and get to their farm in 3 days. So that's going to be a level of reliability and service that's just never been there from online input buying. And then, completely enabled by this level of data science applied to inventory and delivery logistics. So now you combine that with what we've talked about with Norm. Norm eventually gets to work with all those kind of configurations. So not only the agronomic question and answer, but then working with our inventory and our product knowledge systems can then, manage a decision based on availability of product and delivery time. And a producer could say, I'm dealing with this pest. What's the best way to treat it? And can you get me the product? And Norm could say, it's this, it can be there tomorrow. And so that's ultimately the level of convenience and service that we're trying to create for producers.
Right. Well, I want to get straight into Norm. But before we do, maybe just for someone who hasn't seen the announcements about Norm or the social media or other media that's out there about it, can you just give us a really just kind of brief, easy to understand description of what is Norm?
Sure. Yeah. The highest level, Norm is an artificial intelligence powered ag advisor. And so a farmer can ask Norm any question about agriculture. And Norm has been trained on a lot of high value agronomy data, and Norm will spit out an answer. Norm is also very much an experiment. So we're in the process of fine tuning and learning from how different farmer members are using Norm and making it better as we go. But yeah, the goal here is really to provide a frontline guidance and expertise to farmers who have questions about their operation.
And if I understand correctly, Norm is built upon ChatGPT. Is that right?
That's right. So we took the base ChatGPT model, which has gotten a lot of press coverage of late, and we're really interested in trying to figure out both personally and professionally, how well does it do ag? And it does a lot of things well. It's very conversational. It can answer questions in a lot of different ways. But when it comes down to some of the nuance of agriculture, like, what's the specific, labeled uses for atrazine in Western Iowa on corn and pigweed, ChatGPT base model just doesn't cut it. And so we said, all right, what would it take for us to take this amazing new technology, really game-changing innovation, and make it something that is useful and reliable and dependable for farmers? And so over the past couple of months, we've been teaching Norm, so to speak, about agriculture. And so that's really what Norm is. It's a GPT chatbot trained on high-quality agronomy information and targeted at farmers.
Awesome. Tell us more about what that looks like to train Norm. Now, obviously, FBN, you have a lot of great data. Was that data in a format that was like AI trained, format, or what did you have to do to actually transfer that data into Norm?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's uncharted territory. This is such a new technology. Our team really had to figure it out as we went along. But there's a couple of different ways that you can, train a tool like this. And the first is just using natural language. So basically text, the way you and I talk, the way somebody writes a blog, the text from an extension article online. And so we identified sources of high quality agronomy text and went through some processes to kind of condense it and make it as efficient as possible. And then we fed it to Norm and said, all right, Norm, if a farmer asks you about any of these topics that we've trained you about, don't go reference the base GPT model, reference the data that we've told you about. And so that's the kind of first type of training we do. And so it's all around just natural text. The second type of teaching that we can do is basically point Norm to a database. And so, we have instructions that say, Norm, if a farmer asks you about a product label, don't just invent some text, go reference this database that FBN's built on product labels. And, it was great for us because we've been the store team, the team that runs the e-commerce side of FBN that sells crop protection and seed and animal feed and animal pharmaceuticals. They had already spent the last 5 years structuring all this label information about all the products that FBN offers on its store. And so that actually made it quite easy. We just say, Norm, if there's a question about a product on the store, reference this label database. And so it kind of takes the randomness out of it. It's just like, hey, asking about atrazine in Iowa, telling you the response from the label.
That's really cool. Now, what about things that Norm doesn't know? Will Norm say it doesn't know when it doesn't know? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that we handle that. First of all, we really want Norm to be for farmers and about agriculture. And so we do have some guardrails that say, Norm, if somebody's asking you a question that's not related to agriculture, you're not supposed to answer. And people have come up with some creative ways around that. And those are the fun give and take and learning that's going on. But we really do want Norm to focus on ag. And so that's kind of one way that we do it. Another, if it's not an area that we have kind of explicitly trained Norm on, but is an area that we want to train Norm on in the future. So for example, right now, soil conditions are not part of our training model. And top of mind for a lot of farmers right now to figure out, well, is the soil warm enough in my area? Norm, instead of making up a response, will say, I'm still learning about that topic. Please check back later. And so that's kind of another way we handle areas that Norm doesn't know about. And then if it's a little bit more far afield, so it's not something that we've trained Norm on, it's not something that we intend to train Norm on. So let's say like the best movies about farming, Norm can answer that. He'll refer back to the original GPT base model.
Maybe give us a sense of where you see this technology, this platform of Norm fitting in. I would imagine it's not intended to take the place, of an in-person trusted advisor, but probably to fit somewhere in between a Google search and an agronomist visit, and maybe talk about what you're noticing as far as the type of early traction you're getting from farmers with this.
Sure. No, that's great. Something we think a lot about. And I should say, up front that Norm very much is still in beta mode. And so we have a very clear disclaimer that Norm's not intended for real agronomic guidance at this time. And it's important to always follow the label directions and local regulations. And so, we don't think that Norm's ever going to be kind of a direct replacement for, somebody coming out, visiting your field, pulling up recently emerged corn and helping you develop a, fertility or pest management plan. But, we think about all of the different areas of expertise that farmers need to have to be successful today. It's a lot for even a single agronomist to be able to master, from plant genetics to soil health and crop protection chemistry and regulations and equipment maintenance and grain trading and hedging. I mean, the climatology, the list goes on and on. I mean, farmers are expected to master all of these different fields. I don't think there's a single profession that requires so much deep and technical knowledge of so many different areas. And so, we really see Norm as not a replacement to any one of those, experts per se, but rather kind of the first line of defense if you've got a question. Maybe you're out there in the planter and having an issue with maintenance and your John Deere rep's not available. Be able to ask Norm, what's the 9th pin of this CAN bus do? Or, these are the kinds of things Norm does really well. And so we really envision Norm to be kind of that first stop. Rather than going to Google, you can ask Norm if it's about agriculture, and the responses will be hopefully really relevant to your operation.
And I think you sort of see it as where's the technology today, and then where can you see this all going? And I would imagine in the future, you can easily see how AI gets embedded into virtually every evaluation and question and process flow decision-making process that a farmer goes through when they do anything online, or even have need a curious quick answer. And what has become as reflexive today as Googling something using an AI will probably be not too long, because you see the power of it and the breadth of it, and putting it, back into common language, and, from everything from equipment to fertility to soil to crop protection to markets, everything Kit talked about, but it's remarkable in its breadth and depth.
Yeah. And in a future where multiple companies in agriculture have developed their own sort of like AI-based applications, what are the differentiators? Is it differentiators in database and data quality? Is it differentiators in how well the, in this case, Norm or the Norm competitor is trained? How do you differentiate yourself in this new AI-driven world?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of axes that we think about differentiating ourselves. But I think it first and foremost comes down to unique and proprietary data sets. And so, the work that we have done in building out the FBN store, the work that we've done on underwriting standards for loans for farmland and equipment and operating loans, the work we've done on automating parts of the crop insurance application process in conjunction with our crop insurance agents, all of this has developed a really robust proprietary data set on these different parts of agriculture. And so, Seed Finder, for example, it's probably the largest database of seed performance anywhere. And so all of these things that we've been building over time now can really make it easy to build high quality responses into Norm. And those are things that are not going to be easy to replicate for other companies in the future. So that's kind of one way we think about differentiation. I think the other way is just the quality of our team. The data science team at FBN has been named one of the top 10 most innovative data science groups by Fast Company last year. And so really proud of the talent that we have, and technical talent. And these aren't just kind of run-of-the-mill data scientists. They often have PhDs in bioinformatics for seed breeding or animal health. So there are agricultural experts that also have the computer science and data science. And that's just a really unique skill set that we've been building over the years at FBN. So those are kind of two ways that we think about it.
Well, I mean, it's like it said, I mean, we've spent 8-9 years now building out the corpus that Norm can then interact with. And it's all those various data feeds that are both macro. So you can have soil, you can have weather, you can have satellite, you can have remote sensing, you can have markets. So there's all of those. Then there's products and refining that whole process, whether it's in crop protection, seeds, pharmaceuticals for animal health. Then there's also the models, the important models that then interact with those. So whether those are product matching models or yield algorithms or fertility models or nutrition calculations or, what we call an acre pack at FBN, which is a crop plan or delivery optimization. That's all those other components to it as well that then can help, augment the decision-making even further. And then lastly, you have like the intelligence of your farm. Right now, Norm is not aware of a user's farm, and Norm is really, running off our data, running off various models. And so there's a whole other, step change in functionality and use once a user allows Norm to be aware of its farm, because then it can do optimization within the farm, within the field, within that farmer's equipment, within that farmer's current inventory of products or inventory of grain, within the local pricing environment that farmer operates in. All those things will be capable as those, different components and, fidelities of data get hooked up to one another. So you can imagine a future where, a farmer has all their own farm's data, all the market's data, various models and algorithms that, help optimize, which Norm can then balance and run, equations on, and be able to do that concurrently. So like one farmer asked Norm a really, really interesting question, which was, I'm located in this part of Arkansas. I plant cotton, rice, soybeans. Please look at prices over the last 6 years and yields and tell me the optimal rotation, the economically optimal rotation. That's a really hard problem. There's a lot that it has to know from both their farm, the market, the weather, the genetics, the products that are available. But that's not too far away in terms of being able to answer that kind of question. So it's really, really fascinating.
It really is. In a situation like that, does FBN already have the data points on some customers to be able to kind of put all that together? Or are we going to run back into a limitation on data capture?
In many cases, yes. It depends on how deep a farm, plug-in to FBN goes. But, with a lot of our new projects we have on things like sustainability with ADM. So you can imagine folks who qualify into sustainability programs do a lot of monitoring and verification of their crops, on fertility, soil test, as well as other inputs. So there's a host of attributes. And so if a farmer has input data, they have their cost and price and financial data, they have their market data in there with FBN, Norm in theory and AI in theory, we're not there yet, but in theory could be able to, put all those pieces together combined with weather, markets, and forecasting. So it really gets, extremely interesting really fast.
Yeah, and I'd also note, we have a great team of veterinarians and agronomists on staff and loan officers and appraisers. And so that's also a really valuable asset for us. Because of the breadth of businesses that FBN touches and the expertise that we have internally, we actually have this kind of steady feedback mechanism. So we feed up all the agronomic responses to our crop consultants and have them evaluate the quality of the responses. We do that for the veterinary stuff as we're starting to roll that out. And so that also is another way in which we're kind of constantly improving and kind of reinforcing the quality of the responses.
Yeah, that's really important because the QA here is huge as these models train themselves.
And does that literally look like, a veterinarian, as an example, reviewing, here's something a producer asked and here's what Norm responded, and kind of getting a sense of whether that really answered the question or not? Or what does that look like? That's really interesting.
So starting from the initial training, we actually had some of our internal vets and agronomists kind of actively helping us develop a list of training questions. So what questions do we want to make sure Norm gets right? And then they evaluate the answers. Like, this is good, but Norm's ignored this particular thing, or this is totally wrong. And so that was kind of part of the initial training. Now what we do is Norm actually helps us classify the types of responses. So Norm can look at all, thousands of questions that the broader member community have asked and classify them. So we've got 165 that are around soil conditions. And so then we can send a subset of those to a crop consultant that focuses on soil conditions, for example, and they can in a doc can kind of go through and evaluate the quality of the responses. So that's very much we're kind of building that automated process so that our humans can review in an anonymized way, of course, because we're obviously protect the identity of the members asking the questions. But it's a really great system, and I think they're enjoying it as well.
Well, Charles, you sort of been building up to this, it would seem, in hindsight, for the last 8 or 9 years. Is this where you thought things were going? And if so, did it seem to happen like slowly and then all at once?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because it kind of gets at the way farmers are interested in asking for information and the types of information they really want to know. And we've been on various parts of that journey for a long time. So FBN started with benchmarking and seed analytics and seed finder, which was largely for producers to find what's the best seed for my farm, which seed should I plant. Then it got into pricing. And so, okay, which crop protection product is most affordable? Which one should I buy? And so now when we see them starting to use Norm, it's very funny because they ask those questions in the exact same way. They say best herbicide for this, or best corn seed for Central Illinois, or for this soil. And so answering that question in that way is phenomenally hard. And that's kind of goes back to all the different components that have to be there to answer a question like best herbicide program for this specific weed for my exact conditions. I need to know what you've been planting. I need to know what you planted last year. I need to know the products you used last year. I need to know the availability of the products that are available in the FBN or the inventory system. I need to know the cost of those products and the cost of the alternatives, the efficacy of those products, right? All those different components go into evaluating a question like that. And what makes AI so phenomenal is that suddenly you can run those multivariable calculations and analyses virtually instantly if you have all the right connections into the system. So it is certainly fascinating, and I think it's putting us just one step closer to farmers being able to really, really, truly have a fully fledged assistant there who can help evaluate the reams of information from the real world and agricultural data from their farm, from the available products and alternatives that they have to consider, and condense those into a really concise answer or set of suggestions. Because as Kit said, you have to master so many different disciplines on the farm. You can't be an expert in every single one or know the whole universe of information that's available to you in seed, crop protection, fertility, markets at all moments. But those data feeds are accessible to you now, and they now can be integrated with AI in terms of plain and simple analysis.
And how long has Norm been available for FBN members to use? And what have been anything that has surprised you or the key learnings so far?
Well, this is the fun part, right?
Well, as I mentioned, it took us about 3 or 4 weeks to get the first working prototype of Norm out. We had to fine tune for a couple of weeks beyond that, and then we launched just 2 weeks ago. So this is very much early stages of Norm, but the responses have been tremendous. And so we've got hundreds and hundreds of members asking Norm questions. I think the average session is something like 10 or 15 questions. One of the interesting things is kind of where Norm fails, at least particularly for me, as we're trying to make Norm better. And so one of the early errors Norm was making, quite comically, is he would reference different FBN agronomy blogs. We have this great suite of high quality agronomy blogs from the past 5-6 years, but sometimes Norm got too good at that. And so someone would ask a question, he'd say, let me point you in the direction of an FBN agronomy blog. And he would completely make up a blog that didn't exist. And so he would drop a URL to something that sounded great, like strip till best practices for Northwestern Iowa. Like, this is too specific to be real. And it would take you to a non-existent website.
Oh, I was going to say, if he could just write that blog on the spot and create the hyperlink and share it, that's a wild content generation technique.
That's not too far away either in theory. So that's the other exciting thing. But yeah, those are the AI hallucinations where, that's why the QA process is so important right now, because we're saying, hey, that blog doesn't exist, but Norm figured out exactly which blog needed to exist to answer the question. And then in theory could go out and research that if it needed to. So it's really fascinating. But I think seeing the ways in which farmers want to consume information, they want to ask a question, and the way they want it to come back to them is one of the most interesting things that Norm does. And, as I mentioned, they so often want to know best of this, best seed, best herbicide, best product, most effective, least cost. And that's a huge complex problem to be able to answer that. And it's not just a Google list, right? So there's a lot of optimizations there. Farmers are incredibly interested in optimizations around weather and predictions of weather. Should I plant today? Should I spray? Is it safe to spray? Right? You got to know all the variables around that, the exact conditions that you're on in your farm and what's happening locally. And then same thing with markets. But there's really no limit to the types of things it can do. So we've seen people, do Black-Scholes options analysis on Norm. We have seen people do parts lookups on machinery and go very deep. You can describe a machinery problem that's taking place in your machinery, and Norm will diagnose it and give you a set of potential problems that are taking place in the equipment. And then you can keep asking it, okay, you have identified this part or this potential issue, find the part. What's the part ID? And it will take you all the way down to the solution and then the actual solve, which is a whole other set of interests. So in fertility, tons of questions around fertility programs for the right soil types or for various crops. The breadth of crops that farmers are interested in asking about is probably one of the most interesting things to us. It's way beyond corn and beans. It's orchards, it's apples, it's apiary, it's goats. I mean, it's the full breadth of agriculture people are curious about. Home garden, people are asking questions about. If it's in chemical or crop protection, which is a big area for FBN, can this product be used on this crop? And again, you need to know what are the safe practices. Can that product tank mix? How does it mix with other things? Those are all logic that then we have to build for Norm to draw off. So that's not, available information that could just be consumed on the internet in some way by an AI. You have to build those structural logic models that then an AI can consume, tied to the product intelligence, tied to then the farm specific conditions, right? So it has just been kind of limitless. One of the coolest things I saw, there was a question was a farmer was asking a specific model of seed drill. They wanted to know what setting they needed to use on that drill to hit this planting population in a certain crop. And by putting in the model, Norm then went and determined through the machinery use guide, the math of how you set the drill, showed the math. Here's exactly how I'm calculating this, and therefore your setting needs to be 1.25 inches. And it was just a step-by-step process of educating the person exactly how to do and solve the problem, exactly how the AI went and solved the problem as well. So it's really, really, really fascinating. And as Norm becomes more aware of products in FBN, as we said, it's not even yet aware of FBN Seed Finder and all the distinctions of seeds in terms of trait packages and seed optimizations that we have in FBN Seed Finder that it will start to be able to access its full knowledge of all these, fertility or tank mix or animal health and animal nutrition models that we've built that it will be able to access. And then eventually you could plug your farm into it as well if you wanted. So those kinds of questions, around optimizations and product selection are just going to get more and more capable here. And it's really like progress is in a matter of days. This technology is moving so fast that's the exciting stuff. You're not waiting months or years to come out with new evolutions or completely new versions. It's as soon as we can hook these things up and as soon as we can build these connections and test it, Norm is getting step changes in functionality and use to the farm.
I know a lot of that is the models and just refining that over time, but is part of that, accessing new data sets, maybe like publicly available data that maybe isn't factored in Norm right now, becoming available and things like that. Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, we're paying very close attention to the types of questions farmers are asking and say, all right, the soil conditions is a great one. And the kind of first version of Norm did not know anything about the weather. And so, based on how many farmers have been asking about kind of near-term forecasts and soil conditions, we made that a priority. And so I think, over the next couple of days, we should have the soil conditions module built out. And so we basically ingest some National Weather Service data. We combine it with a model in the data science team that looks at soil type along with temperature and recent rainfall and develops a kind of soil conditions index. And so we can report out on that. So it's a combination in that case of, hey, taking a public data set, which is the National Weather Service, doing some data science on top of it, because we also have access to some of the public soil data, and then spitting out a response and then embedding that into Norm.
We didn't have this a week ago. We get to see exactly what farmers want to ask. And then, Kit and the team can deploy that still in the period where that's a relevant question. We're still in the middle of planting here. So the technology is evolving almost as quickly as the needs, are being identified.
And this, to put this in context, like that would have taken 3 months development 2 years ago or more, and then product design time, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is the other I think oft overlooked part of what's amazing about this technology is how quickly it allows us to iterate. And so we want to be releasing exciting, useful new features every other week over this growing season. And we're really excited about, as planting really hits peak and farmers start to get bored behind the wheel of the cab, we hope that they start to check out Norm and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, and this gets to a question I wanted to ask you guys, and it's really interesting because I'm learning here as I'm listening to you. You hear two different things in ag tech. On one hand, you often hear like everybody is walled off with their data and the interoperability is really tough and just like all these siloed data sets everywhere in ag tech. And on the other hand, if you talk to someone in ag tech, they're like, yeah, we're all better together if we have, a more rich data set. And so they're almost contradictory in a way. Does this actually push us more in the former direction of like more protective with our data because it might be the most valuable thing our company has?
Well, I think, what it may do is it sort of says, there may be very specific types of data that are accessible in no other way that are very important for a farm to generate. So let's take like irrigation, for example. An irrigation, or data set is not existing on John Deere. It's not existing elsewhere. It may be proprietary to that system. And then a farmer can decide, okay, how do I want to use that? And would an irrigation data set be more valuable to use if it was combined with a crop growth data set, with a remote sensing data set, with a market price data set, with all the other information that was potentially available to it? Yeah, 100%, right? So AI and these kind of models still require data that might be coming from sensors or might be coming from other things that are being deployed on the farm. But certain types of information, as Kit said, like information that's on the internet, let's say Wikipedia, is now fully commoditized in a sense through an AI. So there's always going to need to be hardware. There's always going to need to be sensors and mechanisms for capturing this type of information. And I think it's how those Lego blocks kind of go together is going to be up to people to decide which ones they want to plug in effect.
And I think the other thing that I want to mention, and this kind of goes back to your earlier question about what differentiates the way we are approaching AI from some of the other big agribusinesses, and I'm sure we'll go in this direction eventually. Our philosophy has been from day one, making the data that we have access to available and accessible to our members, and using that data to help them optimize their operations. And so I have no doubt that there are already GPT experiments and a lot of the other big agribusinesses internally that are helping, improve their pricing strategies and revolutionize marketing and things like that. But we are farmers first, and that is a big part of our philosophy. And so, our thinking here is like not just how we can sequester this way and help the business become more efficient on the backside. It's like, hey, how do we take this value and get it front and center to our members? And so I think that's also just very, very FBN. It's the way we kind of think about solving these problems, and we really hope that there will be a lot of uncertainty and around how AI kind of disrupts a lot of different industries. And it's our commitment to make this kind of available to our farmer member community and give them a chance to experiment with it as well and get comfortable with it, for free on FBN. So that's, I think, another part of our philosophy that I think is kind of unique, and I really think will differentiate those companies that are able to use this to really provide more value to their customers and ones that are just focused on kind of shareholder value.
Yeah, and I think it also giving farmers control. So often what you see people doing in Norm is they'll sort of say, what do you know about me? Or in essence, what can you tell me about my farm? And what they're really asking is like, hey, how much do you really know, and do you know who I am? And that right now, Norm is completely segmented off from a user. It knows your zip code, so it knows, okay, you're in Northwest Iowa, but that's about it. And so what we could do is you can enable people to then say, all right, I want my farm to be visible by me. But so, Norm also doesn't take data sets from other places and send it back to somewhere else, right? So that's a very important core foundation of AI. Data is not coming in from FBN and going somewhere else, right? We don't sell data, we don't transfer data. And in those ways, users' data stays with their farm, and then there's an anonymized and aggregate version that's used in analysis that they can access anonymously in FBN. So a farm could then enable, a system like a Norm to say, okay, let's optimize my farm. Let's look specifically at my soils, find my best fields, give me the optimum, combination of seeds and fertility programs and crop protection programs for my specific conditions and fields, and tell me, exactly which fields to put my most expensive genetics on, for example, at exactly what populations. And it will be able to do that. But, the user should have control of that, and then also know that that answer and that intelligence that it provided, then stays within the walled garden in a sense of their own farm.
Not being a data scientist, being far from it, but with something like this, where you can have, an AI model that can go essentially tap into various data sets and get you the answer you're really looking for, does that make things like APIs less necessary? I mean, can an AI sort of just like go find the data I need as long as I have access to it, and I don't need to build sort of these data pipelines everywhere?
I think that's very much something that this type of AI is going to enable. Now, we've actually had great luck kind of integrating Norm into existing APIs. And I think there's always going to be a level of kind of quality and structure and performance that comes from APIs. So I don't think they'll necessarily go away as a technology, but you could imagine, tools like Norm helping structure that data in a massively scalable way that was never really possible before. And so, the ability for these tools to handle that unstructured data, and it's not just text, it's speech to text. So other AIs are being able to take, podcast transcripts and turning them into text. And then all of a sudden that becomes this whole corpus. And so, you could imagine a future, and actually a future as in a couple of weeks from now, where we could, work with you, Tim, and get the whole future of agriculture history transcribed and build an AI bot that's knows everything about your podcast and can take on your persona when asking questions and things like that, and really help you do a lot of exciting new things with the brand and content that you've built.
And play it back to you in your own voice.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I use a software or AI-driven software called Descript, and they have my voice. I had to record for like 5 minutes, so they've got my voice, and now I could just type out what I want to type out, and it'll come out in my voice. So this podcast is gonna live on long after I'm dead. We'll be on episode like 10,000. In my voice. Somebody else will have to be doing the typing. Well, Norm will just run my podcast.
Hey, maybe we get Norm to help you script a back and forth with Norm.
Okay, I don't know. I was going to say, maybe if Norm can generate an intro to this podcast, I can put it into script and it'll come out in my voice. It'll be completely AI driven. I don't know if that's possible, or that might be a little bit out.
Be careful when you challenge a data scientist. I can already see Kit going onto a different screen and working on it.
Yeah, maybe we could follow up, if that's all right. We could follow up later this afternoon with a Norm generated intro to the podcast.
Well, that's exactly what we did. Kit sent over a script generated by Norm, and I put that script into Descript, which actually outputted what you're about to hear. I often on this podcast, people will say, oh, I don't really like the sound of my own voice. It creeps me out or whatever. And I don't usually have that problem, because I'm just used to it. But this creeped me out to hear something I did not write, I did not record in my own voice. So here it is. Here's the AI-driven potential intro to this podcast. Welcome to the Future of Agriculture podcast, where we explore the people, companies, and ideas shaping the future of the agriculture industry. I'm your host, Tim Hamrich, and today we'll be diving into the world of artificial intelligence and agriculture as we discuss FBN and Norm, the world's first AI ag advisor. Every week, I sit down with farmers, founders, innovators, and investors to share stories of agtech, sustainability, resiliency, and the future of food. We believe innovation is an essential part of the future of agriculture, and real change comes from collaboration between scientists, entrepreneurs, and farmers. We lead with optimism, but we also bring data. In today's episode, we're going to explore how FBN, or the Farmers Business Network, has introduced Norm, the world's first AI ag advisor, and how this groundbreaking technology is transforming the agriculture industry. We'll discuss the challenges farmers face today and how AI-driven technologies like Norm can help farmers make more informed decisions, optimize their resources, and increase their profitability. We'll be joined by experts from FBN who will share their insights on how Norm was developed, the cutting-edge features it offers, and the real-world impact it's having on farmers and their operations. We'll also hear directly from farmers who are utilizing Norm and how this AI Ag Advisor has impacted their farming practices and results. Throughout our conversation, we'll touch on topics like precision agriculture, data-driven decision-making, and the importance of collaboration and communication in driving the future of agriculture forward. We'll also discuss the role AI could play in addressing critical global challenges such as climate change, food security, and resource management. As always, we want to hear from you, our listeners. How do you envision the role of AI in the future of agriculture? What challenges do you think AI can help solve? Share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #FutureOfAg. So grab your headphones and join us on this fascinating journey into the world of AI and agriculture. Let's explore together how FBN and Norm, the world's first AI Ag Advisor, are revolutionizing the agriculture industry and what this means for the future of food. I mean, that is crazy, right? I've never seen those words, never read those words. That was purely AI driven. The future is here and the future is wild. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I hope it got the wheels turning about what's coming next in ag tech. I really think this is a big part of it. I really appreciate Kit and Charles for being on the show. This is really an enjoyable episode for me. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about what they're doing, or if you'd like to use Norm, membership for FBN is free. So just go to their website, sign up, become a member, and you can use the tool there. If you have questions or ideas or comments about this concept, I'm always open to it. Love hearing from you guys. You can do that via Twitter at Tim Hamrich, tim@aggrad.com, or LinkedIn DM works as well. Thank you to Kit and Charles for being on the show. Thank you to Calgary Economic Development for being our quarterly presenting sponsor. And last but certainly not least, thank you for your time and your attention. I really don't take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.